Okay. So first of all, thanks a lot. I'm learning new things, and now finally I know that I have to blame the Mongols for all the raki I drank when I was doing my field research with the Roma people and the Gypsy. Apparently also they have been involved in the raki production thanks to the Mongol. So whatever I study here, it's actually how food and food habits have been extremely useful for the Roma community. I focus on Italy especially, but it can be generalized to survive in a very hostile environment. So it's just have been very recently published, but it's still I'm still doing modifying some things. So the first thing that I was looking for is that actually I was interested in check what about food and the Roma people, it's their culinary tradition and so on. And then somehow I went deeper and I discovered coping mechanism applied in order to survive and not being assimilated by the majority quite often. So these are the 3 points of my studies. And also, of course, how I have this kind of food tradition that define myself in comparison to someone else, but also how food can identify rules within the group. And I focus especially on gender divisions. So I found the Jewish community after the diaspora extremely useful to study the Roma people. Why? The first assumption is that meals are just, of course, not only places where we eat and get nutrients, but are important place where we meet the other. We create trust, we talk about business, marriages, and so on. But if we have some kind of dietary rules or rules in general that prevent me to share the same table with you, me and you will not meet each other, quite likely. And then I thought about the Jewish communities and the rules of kosher food and thrift, and how somehow this kind of rules allows usually in Europe minority groups of Jewish people to stay aside from the table of the majority and somehow survive maintaining their culture. Of course, it's one of the the role of food rules. It's not the main, however. And then I thought, wow, actually, why the Roma? And they are the biggest minority in Europe. And still their origins, we still debate about their origins. Very likely they come from India, and they arrived around the 5th the 9th century AC. And in Italy right now we have something like 120,000 to 180,000 Roma in Italy. Still, Italy is the worst country for them to be. It's the country with the highest level of racism. And by the way, 60% of them are Italian citizens. So I'm saying that because usually in the media, the way they portray them, it's awful. They're considered less than human being. The words used to describe them are always implying somehow of dirty, lazy, that don't want to be inside the society, and so on. So that's why I specified there's a lot of ignorance related to that. So, however, even if they're in Italy since a long time, many centuries, and still there is such a high level of racism against them, they were able to maintain their community, their language, music, and survive as a group. And many have been the attempt to wipe them out. For example, one of the first law and first written proof that we have of their arrival in Venice was this law that say Venice citizens can actually kill a gypsy man and have all of his belongings, and there will not be penal persecution against them. So this is one of the first things that we know they were arrived here. So how does food play a role? Okay, these are just the theoretical background. quickly is the one that I mentioned before, the importance of the meal, especially because it is a reiterated act that we do daily. So if there are some kind of institution and roles between and within the meals, this kind of like a repeated enter in the society. It was actually, and maybe it's more interesting to focus on the caveats. So there are very, very few Roma scholars. Like people who study the Roma and the Gypsy community are often Gage, so like me, like people that are not inside the Roma community. So it's important to try to avoid any kind of bias that of course will come with that. It's an oral culture, so this is like implied that it's more difficult to like find sources and so on. Another important thing is that there is a high level of diversification. Of course, like I focus on Italy, and already within Italy there are like many communities with different tradition and so on. And again, as like we quite know, the role of food in research sometimes is dismissed as something that it's not important, not relevant, and so especially when I did my field research and I did my interview with them, and I was like, I'm actually interested in food. It was like looked like something trivial and not very important, especially when I asked about men. But I'm gonna specify that one. So the lines of analysis are those like I thought about like, wow, maybe there are some kind of food rules that were just inside the community of the Roma people. And then I also noticed that there was something interesting related again to the Jewish history of the diaspora and the nomadic life of the Roma. Another one, it's the ghetto, the historic institution of the ghetto in Europe at least, and the nomad camp. It's different here in the UK, like nomad camps are unfortunately something very specific of Italy. Like they were supposed to be a kind of like momentary solution, as many other momentary solutions we have. And there are kind of ghettos created outside the cities, like far away from many services. I will show you pictures later, often now without electricity, running water, and so on, where Roma people, wherever they come from, stay, or are forced to stay actually. And then the relationship between genders. So the main results, first of all, like that, and like one of the line, it's always this idea of like the dirty gypsy, that they're like they don't wash each other, they don't wash, they are filthy, and so on. Actually, like the main distinction that like all of them mention more or less, and I also found in some literature, it's the distinction between food that are poor and foods that are considered impure or unlucky. So the categories are generally what is the food that is considered lucky, and we see chili, pickle, lemon, like these kinds of food that somehow reminds of like a situation of uncertainty. If we think about like that, this is something that always came during the interview out, like, so do you think it's the difference between your cuisine and my cuisine? And always was spiciness, it's more flavor and so on. But this is like the reason may lay in the fact that actually like spices and chili somehow like can cover the fact that food is spoiling easily. Or if you think that if you have a very poor diet with a lot of starch and it's very repetitive, some kind of like all this kind of food somehow may add a twist and can change a little bit and make it more interesting. And then like again, the pickle also is very important because it's especially if you are forced to move, if you have a nomadic lifestyle, it's easy to go around and have this one with you. Require very like little time to like cook and so on. And also it's one of the things that blew my mind was the role of the apron, the fald, as they say. So when like the common sense, our common sense, it's like you wear an apron because like when you cook, you don't want the food to make you dirty, to make your clothes dirty. In the Roma conception, the body, it's generally something that it's in contact with the outside world and it's considered dirty and impure. However, food must be pure because it's gonna get inside you and like And so like it's very important the way you cook food and what you put inside your mind, otherwise you will be polluted. So the apron, it's important in the Roma community because prevent your body, especially the genitals of the woman that are considered particularly impure, to contaminate the food that we go and feed the whole family. I'm gonna explain later the role of the woman inside the community, but like this was something completely like different, especially from what we read from the media. Another important aspects related to their nomadic life or the ghetto, and you see within their food tradition, is, for example, the lack of oven. The oven is something that like you have to stay in a place to build an oven that will stay there. But if you are forced to move, as they have always been forced, like there's something that there is no utility in use that. While it's very important to have barbecue, for example. Those are like Roma are one of like very used. Like they use a lot of barbecues in their cuisine and their tradition, culinary tradition. Another interesting thing was, of course, like they collect food from all over the place they have been. Not static, but it's more the way they manage to prepare it. They interact with it. And a nice thing, it's the ricetta al cucchiaio in Italian means like recipe and food that you eat with your spoon. And why it's important, because especially if you are in a poor condition, you feel that like you have more food. If you just put a potato, instead of roasting a potato, if you put in some broth or water and boil it with some spices, it's gonna fill you up easier and faster. So the spoon, it's like something that like often it's found in the example that I found. Of course, another animal, we don't have beef, we have no pigs mentioned, we have hens. Hens because they are easy. They are small and it's easy to go around with them. Like it's not, they're not complicated as bigger animals. Sorry, I didn't mention what is actually impure, food that are impure. We don't have a specific categories of food. Some example, the only main one actually in Italy, it's horse. But just because as a word, like they used to be those people that arrived and managed the horse. And also horses were very important to move with the caravans. So they were not considered food, at least in extreme cases of like hunger. What is considered impure, it's more the act or the situation you're cooking in. And this introduced me to the role of gender. Why this is very important? Because as I said before, there is a kind of dichotomy between what is outside and what is inside. And the role of woman, it's very peculiar and very strange. She's the only one allowed to cook, or actually force, we can say whatever. Like when I was interviewing people, I interview both men and women, and when I was asking men, okay, tell me, like, do you cook, or what do you like to eat? Like when I was mentioning food, immediately, like it's like the macho, like why are you asking me about food? You should ask my wife, you should ask my sister, my daughter. Real men don't touch the food. So on one side, like food is used as a way to control the woman. It's quite often in many other society. However, as I said before, food is an important role to create strength inside the family, or it can destroy it if it's impure. So it's very important that the person who cooks, so here a woman, maintain his purity. So, and now let's think about the long gowns, the way that they roll, the dress they have, it's very covering. So the woman must be loyal, of course, like should be devoted to the family, and she can pollute the food if she is a prostitute, for example, or if she has lost honor. So I found it very interesting, but I didn't come out with a solution, because on one side, the woman, like Roma women are usually illiterate, they married at very young age. There is definitely a high level of discrimination. So on one side, they are kept down. But on the other, they are the one with the power of polluting through the food. So it's, I don't know, it's quite interesting, this double role that I have inside here. So yeah, the idea is that like sexual desire is so pure, it's Freud. It's so strong that you have to control it. Another interesting thing that came out today when we were talking about China and the relationship with the death, the most impure thing for the Roma, it's actually death. You don't never mention death, and especially in relation to food. When someone died, usually you throw away the dishes, the forks, the cutlery that that person have used. In relation to that, you didn't even you don't eat, for example, that food that the person who died liked and enjoyed a lot. For a period of time, you avoid everything that is related to that. And yeah, of course. Oh well. And yeah, well, it was actually very close to the end, so I can go again without. So the thing is, like, so to wrap up, what actually I found, it was this dichotomy between what is pure and what is impure inside a community that it's perceived through the media as very, like, uncivilized and something that, like, it's outside the system of civilization and refused to get civilized. Well, actually, the refusal is they refuse to, like, be annihilated or destroyed within their culture. So the most important thing that, like, it's like discovering and studying the other first somehow you to study yourself. And for me, this journey of studying this community, that, like, there is very little is known about that, was to discover a very uncivilized behavior by it's our state or our society, that it's not only in Italy. In Italy, it's where it's strongest. Like, I have many stories of, like, when I started explaining people why I was studying Roma, or that I was studying Roma, was already very problematic and tragic. So I hope you enjoyed. I really did doing that, and I hope to go on and discover more and more. So if you have any questions. Yeah?
Yeah, 2 points are raised.
Yeah, sorry for the PowerPoint. I have no idea how I destroyed it.
And yes, we have some, a bit more time for questions as well. So
just a couple of questions, very brief points. The first one, which I wonder from the talk, is Avanti Cristo means BC in Italian, and you've got AC, and we go 5th to the 11th century AC.
Yeah, it was Annus Domini. Yeah, no, I was like.
Yeah, I know, because a
sorry.
lot of people in English will get confused, but when they were Italian, so so you mean AD, not
Yeah,
AC,
AD. Yes, thanks.
Okay, so it's AD, right? The other point is Roma. I have a problem with that as a Roman historian, because to me Roma in Italian, Latin means the capital of Italy. And I don't know why they call them so Roma, because there's nothing to do with Italy. As you say, they're from India. And we always call them gypsies, because we thought they came from Egypt.
I
So
avoid.
why Roma?
Thanks, that's a very good question. Like, I avoid the word gypsy in English because nowadays it's considered a little bit like not the one that I prefer. And also, like, the word is the singular one, it's Rom. There are, like, many, like, it's Rom, Sinti, Koracane, there are different groups. But Rom actually means men, not human being, men. So they refer themselves, and this is interesting also in seeing the differences between gender. Like, if you're a Roma, a real Roma, it's a real man, and it's the same word. So
Roman is here.
Yeah, but I think it's very confusing in Italy, because you say Roma.
In Italy we use a different. In Italy it's funny. Like, we use a different word, a disprecative word. It's like I use it one of my chapter. It's zingaro. Zingaro comes from ancient Greek. That it's gypsy, Egyptian. That's the white gypsy from Egyptian, because they are, like, a little bit darker. So, but zingaro in Italian, it's from the Greek atzinganoi, so alpha et zinganos, like untouchable.
My friends in Roma should say, "Oh gosh, they're probably the Zinga." So I guess so that's
Yeah.
what Italians call it.
Yeah. So
Oh, interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah?
I was wondering about the cooking, and you mentioned that because of the mobility, that a lot of the cooking is outside in the barbecue, and I'm wondering, in a lot of cultures, there is a distinction between cooking inside and outside as a gender division, and even if Paul's wanted us to talk about the Roma cooked all this time, and maybe he has, but so even in Levi Strauss, like the roasting of meat as opposed to boiling of meat, also has gender associations. And so I wonder, in this context, are the women doing like absolutely all the cooking, or is there some cooking, particularly that's outside cooking and barbecuing, which can or should be done by men?
So it's more related to, like on one side, there is this distinction between meat and what is not meat. So what is not meat, everything that's not meat, it's more a woman domain. Sometimes meat, but depends. If it's a soup and if it's a chicken, it's still the woman domain. If it's something different, more prestigious, and if it's roasted, it's a man domain. Really depends on where we're looking at. Like in the nomad camps, for example, it's the nomad camps are a very like strange place to be, because it's of course like you absorb also from the outside, and it's more, the roasting is still more a man domain, definitely. But it's very peculiar, because like it really depends, like if it's summer, if it's also another interesting things about what you're mentioning. It's like it's funny, like there is a dichotomy between how clean it's the house, the inside of the house, that it's like perfect. This is something that many journalists said, like it's incredible how they can manage to like keep the house so clean, and the outside in the camp it's like completely messed with rats, like it's. But this is also a sign of like a passive aggressive and kind of coping mechanism of like resistance. Like my house inside, it's okay, since you put me in this place and you decide where is like to put like so my family is here, the other family here. The outside, it's the gadget place, our place, and we take care of that. Yep.
Somebody.
Yeah. Paul? What?
Would you like to go first?
I just had a quick question about your words, bibat or unhappy. Sounds like Persian to me. Why would the Roma have a Persian word?
Oh, they because they went through.
Yes.
They arrived.
I went through
Persian.
everybody and picked it
So
up
which
as they went along.
which word is this?
Bibaxed and baxale. It's like the impure, the unlucky food.
What is the word?
Bibaxed.
Without faith or without good timing. I don't know how I translate it.
Yeah. And it was like it was strange, because of course you're not allowed to just go in a camp, nomad camp, like not even if you are a strong man, like, and for sure I'm not. So I encountered this group of gypsy that were working in not Luna Park, it's the name in English, the place where the carnival. It's one of they used to be historical. They are all gypsy. They're one of the carnivals, and I didn't know how to start interviewing them, because it's really. And then I just start asking questions about food. I'm very interested in what do you eat since you travel a lot. I never mentioned any kind of reference to the fact that I knew they were gypsy and I was not. And then at some point I dropped this question and was like, how do you think that your food is different from the Gagé one? So I turned the problem around. In this way, they knew that I know that they were gypsy, but I was not posing myself as the one putting the difference. I was using the other term that also it's in their language. The Gagé, it's usually people who is Gagé doesn't know the word Gagé. So they were amused, and that was actually a good trick to get answer.
I have a question about the record you mentioned from Venice.
Yeah.
Do you happen to know what date?
It was 1390.
Thank you very much. Because the first time that Roma reached particular countries, the records are often quite interesting, and I didn't know.
Yeah. Also in France.
Yes.
I have the theory that the Roma, or whatever, left India because they're Christian and they persecuted the Hindus and they hounded out because they are Christian. At least in the British gypsies are Christian.
But
Although they're Indian by DNA, they're not Hindu or Muslims.
But actually, like religion, it's actually a thing that it's not. They change. Depends on where they are. Usually, they adapt to the place.
They're Muslim.
Exactly, the Korakane Muslim. The main idea right now, the main theory is that they were a lower caste. That for some problems, some cars with road flow, they had to leave. Indeed, many of their food traditions are similar to the one of the castes. And you mentioned yesterday the order in the Ottomans also to learn how who is more powerful. And indeed, the first are the men who are served, the oldest, the younger, then the kids, and then the women. This is something that I wanted to mention.
Okay, any more questions? Yes.
Could you elaborate a bit more on the link between pure, impure, and death?
Yep.
Because again, in the Brahmanical system, pure, impure, with Dumont is very much more about the idea of closeness or remoteness from death.
Yeah, that's very interesting. One thing is they really live in the present, since their concept is that past it's painful, and we don't know anything about the future. We definitely have to focus just on the present. And for example, another thing is related to death and food. It's also 500,000 of Roma people have been killed during the Nazi, and they don't even been recognized as victims during the Nuremberg trials. And they call it the poramos. That means the big devouring. So something that devoured a lot of people and disappeared. In relation to that, it's something they don't talk about at all. It's something considered that bring bad luck. And another example is, for example, we used to call our children, grandchildren, maybe as the grandparents or someone that we want to remember. They absolutely don't do that. You always change the name of the person who died. They destroyed all the things, generally they destroyed the objects of the person who died. This is also another way they pose themselves as different from who is not Roma, since they perceive they are completely against the attachment to to things, to the belongings. So in this way, disrupting is a way also to differentiate themselves to the majority. So, and yeah, that's it's complicated also because there are very few. Lot of research focus, especially in Italy, more focus on politics problem, the way how to scholarize the kids, and the approach. It's definitely not very anthropological. So let's see if I can go on with doing that somehow.